here at Def Method. I am the president of Def Method. My name is Joe, and I'm also the moderator tonight. And we are very honored to have four members, the four members of our tech panel, our healthcare and tech panel, and we're really happy to have all of you here. A brief word about Def Method. We are a software consultancy, which means we work in collaboration with our customers to build custom software. That often can be in the form of new projects, it can be brand new startups, it can be existing code, it can be working with legacy projects, project rescue, anything that you feel like can't be done by Squarespace or WordPress is where you call us. And we are, at the moment, building the greatest software development company in New York City. And we're doing that through sound engineering, through outstanding product development practices, and by listening to our customers and working collaboratively with them every step of the way. Before we start, I want to point out, in case you missed it on your way in, as you were signing in, or not signing in, but as you were putting your name tags, filling out your name tags, there's also an opportunity to sign up for a free technical audit. This is something that we offer to people that attend our events. You sign up, there's no obligation for anything, even the audit. But what will happen is somebody like Julia or myself will reach out to you, ask you a little bit about your business, and see how we can maybe help in an hour or 2 hours of free time. I founded the company, but I'm also an engineer, and so that means I am very opinionated. But it also means that I'm really highly available. You can pick my brain about anything, about a lot of different experiences, and I'm always happy to help. We do quite a bit of work in the healthcare tech space, which is one reason that we organized this panel. I'm proud to be working or have worked with a couple of our panelists here. But for now, I'm going to stop stumping for Def Method, and I'm going to allow our panelists to introduce themselves. Before we go, just to give you a sense of timing, it's about 7:35 right now. So we'll do our Q&A on the panel for about 45 minutes, and we'll open it up to your questions for about another 15 minutes. And then we'll still have about 30 minutes afterwards to grab a drink, to grab some snacks, and to commiserate. Sound good? Okay. One thing I need though is, because I don't have my watch on, but I have always had on. So somebody please give me like a 5-minute warning when we're at about 10 after 8. Sound good? Okay. All right. So I'm not going to ask all of these questions and then have each person answer. But for this one, I will, because I want you to be able to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your company. So let's start with Adriel, and we'll just go straight down the line.
Awesome. So I'm Adriel Irons. I'm Director of Product at Advocacy Insights. We are a data management company, launching a data management platform for healthcare insurance carriers. So we're really focused on the insurer part of the market, and we're a little less than a year old, but we have several clients in the pipeline, so we're launching V1 of our product this year, so pretty pumped about that.
I'm Kat Miller. I'm Director of Engineering for Flatiron Health, which is a little bit bigger, been around a little bit longer. We are an oncology data analytics company, which basically means that we are both an EHR system, so like electronic health records. We provide tools for clinicians, and we also build data sets, research quality data sets. And we work in the space sort of in the intersection of those, which is also clinical trials. We are about to become a bigger company because we're about to become a subsidiary of Roche. We've been around about 5 years, been building data sets for about 3.5.
Ben Licio, I'm the CTO of DaisyBill. DaisyBill has a few different products. Our main product is a SaaS-based solution for medical providers who treat injured workers to bill for their services. A pretty small company, around 15, been around for about 5-6 years. And yeah.
I'm Doug Aaron. I'm the founder and chief executive of Care Cooperative. We're a nonprofit organization that serves medical facilities and patients in need with an emphasis on low-income patients and communities. We enable medical facilities to request and our donor community to provide goods and services that improve patients' quality of life and community health. We've been around for approximately 5 years, and we work with numerous large national health systems to work with their clinicians and provide essential goods and services that are not covered by insurance, not provided by the hospitals, and we enable those patients and communities to receive goods and services that would otherwise be unmet, and we step in to fill that need.
All right, thank you all. So my next question is also a general question. I'll start it with Kat, and anybody else that wants to offer their opinion can, and we'll see where it goes. This is a general question about tech in 2017. And now I'm realizing that we are far enough into 2018 that we should start talking about tech in 2018. But if we're just looking back over the last year, what do you think? What do you think one of the biggest technological advances has been, and how has it impacted the tech industry or your work in particular?
Well, I think that something that's interesting about working in the healthcare industry is much like finance, our data is is like a hot potato, right? You have to be very careful how you put it, you have to be very careful who sees it, and something that's actually been a big advance in my life is the number of services covered under cloud providers that have a BA that allows us to use it for healthcare data. So 3.5 years ago, we couldn't use Redshift, we couldn't use a whole bunch of tools that Amazon provides. We're in the Amazon cloud, so that's what I know best. And we basically, when it started, we had S3 and EC2, and that was it. And it basically means that we can leverage some of the cooler tools that are being built, which frankly were not open to us just a few years ago.
Anybody else have?
Sure. I would agree with that. So my prior experience was with Aetna, and even in the past year, so I joined Abacus this year in January, but even in the past year, that move to the cloud was apparent. Then, with Abacus and working with, large Blues plans and talking to, national payers as well, the receptivity to being in the cloud is a complete 180 from what it was, 4 or 5 years ago. So, there's a lot more emphasis on being, in the cloud or allowing your data in the cloud. And there's a lot more, openness to other methods of, storing your data, of actually having your services and not having to have everything on premise. So I think that's really, moving the industry forward.
And one additional just comment on that is that one reason that's important is that the cloud democratized who could start building a service industry. And I worked for Humedica 10 years ago when we had to have our own server on-prem in order to be able to start the business. So that's a big outlay for someone who's trying to start a business. And so being able to be on the cloud right away is actually a huge potential innovation for people looking to start businesses in the space.
I think from CarePop's perspective, certainly we've seen hospital systems move on to the cloud. Also, we've seen it become more personalized. So for us, as our clinicians work on the ground each day with patients in need, we're seeing a lot more receptiveness by clinicians, social workers, other healthcare providers across the spectrum to encourage and utilize personalized data. It could be from glucose monitors, it could be from heart monitors, Holter monitors that are being used by patients, and integrating that data stream into their clinical decisions, not only in the facility, but also once they leave for preventative care. So being able to track those individuals and determine how can we keep this individual out of the hospital again, and integrating that into what is likely stored down the cloud.
Yeah, and Doug, if I could stay with you for a second. One thing that I think is really interesting about Care Cooperative is that you solicit things that, or you speak with your partner medical facilities to find things that they need, and then when people join the platform, they see exactly those things, and so they're not donating an amount for something that's nebulous. They're buying a specific thing. I'm wondering, have have the requests from those medical facilities become more technical, and they ask for things like glucose monitors, or that's just an example.
Sure.
They ask for things like that.
Absolutely. In fact, we've seen a really interesting spectrum whereby we have a huge influx of folks who would like to request glucose monitors, heart rate monitors. We recently donated at the request of one of our systems a smart room, Amazon Echoes, so that people with very debilitating spinal cord injuries could speak to control the lights, television, radio, and call nurses, rather than having to press buttons because they cannot at that time. And we've seen that technology give people a sense of confidence and freedom that they otherwise didn't have. Because if you're unable to move, there's a feeling of being restricted. And it impacts people's mental health functions too, if you feel that you are captive in your bed. So by using internet-enabled devices, individuals are able to feel more empowered. And it actually has been proven clinically to improve people's recovery speed and also their general level of happiness, which is helpful too. I would also say that there's a huge cohort of folks who are either unable to use because of their condition or just simply still need the basic human touch items. For one of the facilities that we serve, which is Harvard, we serve children in mental health, and we provide those children with...
Tell me a little bit more about that.
Definitely. So when you are on the job and you are injured, it's your employer's responsibility to make sure that you can recover back to full health. And so all the different medical providers that you go to, whether it be a physical therapist or a pharmacy or maybe you require surgery, all of those providers try to do the billing through their group health platforms. And because it's not group health, it's very difficult. And so we basically found a niche where we allow all those providers to bill for those services. And we hope that it actually opens up the doors to more medical providers, because a lot of times providers will not treat the injured worker just because of how arduous and difficult the billing process is. There's all these different forms, and it's not group health. It's not, you don't get paid quickly. It's a mess.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about data, because I think that's when we talked about technical advances with Adriel and Kat, really felt like it was the ability to use some of these cloud services, and then in turn those cloud services have the ability to capture more data, capture it more effectively, manage it more effectively. And Adriel, you mentioned that you as a part of Abacus, you're collecting data from a wide variety of sources. In fact, kind of going wide is part of the play, right? It's a big data play in healthcare tech. And I'm curious about a lot of things, but one thing I'm curious about is what immediate value can one draw, let's say a customer of Abacus, what value can they draw from the data that you are collecting?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of decisions can they make, or how does it help them?
Oh wow, where to start?
Yeah.
So I think that there's a couple areas of value for Abacus Insights, because we're primarily targeting and serving the healthcare payer market, because they have 50, 100 different sources of data coming in for managing their operations, the claims adjudication, paying claims, making sure providers are reimbursed, and then managing their membership as well, and servicing their membership, right? So with all of this data coming in, the issue and the challenge that they face often is that the data is in these different silos. So for example, a member calls in and they're having an issue with particular reimbursement with a provider, right? Well, information on that particular event of care might be split across 3 or 4 different systems, and it's just, you have all dealt with your healthcare providers, or your healthcare insurers, so you know that it can be challenging to get the right answer, right? Well, the platform that we are launching will enable health providers to really get that answer to their customer service reps in a more succinct and easier way, and that's just one use case. Now, we really need to work with our customers to ensure that their applications are taking advantage of having all that data served up. But the way that I always think about data, whether it be operational or reporting, is that you've got an iceberg, right? And so what you see is really just the tip of the iceberg, but you've got 80% of the work and the effort and the challenge in bringing all of that together and making it available at the right time. So just to answer the question, for the actual members or the patients, I think you'll see a lot of improvements in the actual service that they get, whether that be member service or whatever, because our customers are able to better join their data and get it to the right people at the right time.
Okay. So it serves at the base level. It sounds like it serves an operational efficiency.
Right.
End goal.
So yeah, there's two basic areas. There's operational efficiency, and then there's the data analytics play. The thing is, right now, payers they're really trying to do more from a data analytics standpoint and data science standpoint, but I mean they just don't really have the talent or the tools to do so, and so these use cases have yet to even really be explored because people are so kind of getting stuck on the problem of getting the data together and into the right place, right? So we aim to really get to that, data analytics, data science set of use cases, very quickly because we actually will be able to serve the data up for them.
Okay, thanks. Now, Kat, I know so you're collecting tons of data at Flatiron Health, but it's really for a more singular purpose, or at least it appears to be, right? Because you're targeting one specific area, which is oncology.
Right.
So how does it differ for you, or how does data collection or management differ for you?
Differ from the advocacy use case? Or?
Yeah.
So, I mean, one thing that I didn't know before I got into this company is how very specialized oncology is. So there are so many other areas of healthcare where the structured data tells a lot of the story. So you know the drugs, you know the diagnosis codes, and you know a couple of the lab tests, and you have a really decent picture of what's going on with the patient. And in oncology, there's a slew of other data that's really important. So one sort of differential thing that we have to do is find a way to structure that unstructured data and make it usable. So we solve this through a combination of basically an internal mechanical Turk process. So we have humans do it, which is very flexible, and I think there are some things that we will always have to do that way. And pairing that with machine learning to basically make sure that you get the low-hanging fruit in the most automated and sort of efficient way possible, and also to check those humans. Actually, an interesting thing about the humans part is that chart audits is one of the gold standards for getting data in healthcare today is the chart audit, where you literally ask physicians to try to remember patients and have them write down some stuff about those patients. So it's actually something that people who are working with healthcare data are really familiar with. So Flatiron's mission is to learn from the experience of every patient, and I think one thing that's really interesting about having an agglomeration of data like we have is things like really rare tumors. There are actually plenty of diseases and situations that you cannot run a clinical trial for because you cannot recruit enough patients. It's just not possible. Opening a clinical trial at a given site is expensive. You need to be able to recruit at least a couple of patients from that site generally. So if you have one patient in every state with this cancer type, it's not possible to run that clinical trial. My favorite example here is men with breast cancer. 1% of breast cancer patients are men, and this is really not represented in clinical trials because you need enough patients to have an interesting sort of segment there, and you're just not going to get it. So I think one thing that the aggregation of data lets you do is explore populations who were previously severely underrepresented, and it's also true that clinical trials are very young and very white, very wealthy, and so being able to learn from the experience of people who are not all of those things is also really important.
Thank you. Ben and Doug will allow you to put your hat for it.
So from a data perspective, one of the more interesting things that we use our data for is to ensure that the workers' comp payers are in compliance with various state regulations. So because we have thousands of providers, we sit in an interesting place where we get to aggregate all of that data. Each state has very specific regulations for example, what responses we're supposed to get back electronically, what the timelines for payment are. Historically, one provider can complain, they can call up the payer and say, you're taking 45 days to pay, but that's not really going to do anything. And so we've sort of, leveraged the aggregate to, reach out to our contacts, to various payers and say, here's what's going wrong, here's where you're not compliant. We've established relationships with a few of the state regulators to also bring that data to them so that they can sort of monitor from a higher level to say, maybe we need to change regulations because people are not following them, or we need to change how we enforce them. So that's definitely one interesting use.
We're using our data actually to start looking at what types of goods and services patients need on the ground and how that dictates their treatment success. So there are a lot of patients who might need things that physicians, social workers, health providers don't necessarily provide as part of their normal prescription process, but are really needed for these individuals to have a stable recovery or to ensure that they have a smooth process during treatment. And a lot of those items are non-clinical, but they tend to have a clinical impact. So we're starting to use our data to identify what good or service is having a tangible impact on these patients' recovery process, their readmission rates, and also to what extent they can be used to impact community health in specific pockets of communities with different demographics. So we're finding different demographic areas based on income and age, sometimes request different items, and they have different impacts. So our data is beginning to open a window into how that impacts patients' recovery processes.
Okay, thank you. So I have another general question, so I'll give everybody an opportunity to respond. I want to talk about privacy in the healthcare tech space, and I know the first thing you think about with privacy is HIPAA, and I know that HIPAA compliance looms large for a couple of the companies here, not as much for others, but regardless of whether you need to be HIPAA compliant, you are definitely dealing with more sensitive data than the average company, the average non-health tech company. In some ways, it's compared to the banking industry in that financial data and personal health records are like the two things you don't ever want to be compromised. And so, as members of this industry, how are your companies working with that? I mean, do you feel like privacy and HIPAA compliance regulations are working against you? Do you feel like there's a way to work with them? And how do you solve some of these challenges? And let's arbitrarily start with Ben, and then anybody else can jump in.
Great. So, as I mentioned earlier, workers' comp is not healthcare. HIPAA actually explicitly says that it does not apply to workers' comp, mainly for the reason that information, unfortunately, is shared with a lot of different parties. Reports and bills have to be shared with attorneys and a bunch of other parties. And HIPAA could be applied to every single one, but it would make the process really, really difficult to help the injured worker get back to work. And so that's sort of the main reason why it's not applicable. However, we obviously collect social security numbers, dates of birth, very, very important things that we have.
So I'm interested in both perspectives, but Kat, please take it away.
One thing is that HIPAA is really quite reasonable. It's not a ton of crazy red tape. I don't have to do insane things to work on our data. Its limitations are sort of the very fundamental limitations of privacy. So there's a couple of things. You basically can't have identified information about patients unless you're somehow providing a service to them or their providers. that sounds totally reasonable, and it is, but it does mean that if your goal is to aggregate a data set, and you need that information, the identified information, which you might for a number of reasons. So in our case, we go back to the records, and it's very hard to fully redact the records.
Utilize that data for, actually improving outcomes. So, I love the idea of pulling in, whether it's Fitbit or pedometers, Apple Watch, whatever. I really think that that's on the cusp of making a huge impact in healthcare.
Yeah, so I feel like we're actually it's not innovation that's going to happen, it's innovation that's already happened that we're not taking super advantage of. Probably, we still don't collect patient reported outcomes at nearly the levels that we should. Everyone has a smartphone. Even your grandmother probably has a smartphone, so why don't we do that more? I mean,
Could you tell us what patient reported outcomes are?
sure. So I mean, it's basically when you're asking what's the efficacy of a treatment, or what should I give someone this drug, or if they have this disease, how should I treat them? You can look at things like, does their disease get better by a bunch of different metrics, but one of the things you can look at is, did the patient feel better? Were they able to do things that they weren't otherwise able to do? How is their quality of life? This is super important in oncology, because as you probably know, oncology drugs are very toxic. So if I extend your life by a month, but it was a really terrible month, maybe that's not a win for you. And it's something that FDA is very interested in, something everyone's very interested in, and yet the progression towards having that be a standard that we use is very slow.
You have to create a code for that.
Yeah.
I think that's a big one.
So I think that I'm excited to use more of technologies we already have. And if I had to say one thing that I'm actually excited about, I think it's actually trying to make an electronic health record that physicians enjoy using and makes their lives faster and better rather than slower and harder. So whether that's voice to text recognition and sort of better tech around the UI, that's actually something that I think would be a big difference.
Well, the common saying is that workers' comp is about 10 to 15 years behind group health from a technology point of view. So we're still looking at the 90s, well, early 2000s. We're kind of similar to CAT. We're trying to build a better platform so that providers can bill quickly and easily and get paid in 10 days instead of the 30, 40 days that they're getting paid in when they don't use our platform. So we took a very paper-based product or process where they're actually putting bills in envelopes and with the stamp and turned it into an electronic process so that there's transparency and that they're seeing those payments come in much faster. So we're sort of just still using 2000s technology, but trying to make it usable.
But blowing people away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Lots
Context
of
is
FTP servers,
Yeah.
flat files. Yeah.
That's typed limited files,
Yeah.
I think a lot of
yes.
those.
So we love those kind of things.
I think the personalization of data is what it most excites me. Again, from Fitbits, glucose monitors, heart rate monitors, smartphones. And what I think excites me most about it is that it makes the patient a partner in the process. And a huge element of patient care today, as we're moving from a very volume-driven system to a values-based system, and in fact, hospitals are sometimes penalized if they don't meet certain value criteria, is that patients are becoming more confident and empowered to have a say in the operating, in the exam room, to have a say afterwards. And that data gives them a window into themselves. And it's extremely powerful because it enables them to say, oh, now I can understand what my level was, I can speak with my doctor, with him or her about it, and harnessing that data to make the patient a partner in the process and feel like they have an informed opinion to add, even if it's a simple piece of information about a glucose level or a heartbeat, is extremely powerful. And that's why I think that these wearable devices that can be harnessed into a larger data stream, but used by the individual in an understandable way is really, really revolutionary.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first, let's please join me in thanking our panelists. And I'd now like to open up for some questions, and so I will get to you in just a second. The format is so you say it loud enough, then I wouldn't have to repeat it, but if you're a quiet talker, that's okay too. I'll hear the question, I'll repeat it so that everybody can hear, and then we'll give whomever you have a chance to respond. So you can ask a question for one person or the whole group. Great, go ahead.
For you, Catherine. So I think about, say, 1,000 cancer patients. HIPAA, you know everything about them, accurate for the most part. They go online, Google. What are the chances that Google, Amazon knows just as much information, but it's not like truly accurate? So you're researching the drugs that you're taking, the symptoms, everything. And what they say in healthcare, I think Warren Buffett said, the parasite of healthcare is all these middlemen in a way, and compliance is oftentimes regulatory, is why you can't kick them out. So do you see that collection of data by Bezos, the online community, being their biggest advantage to maybe making moves and shaking healthcare and cutting costs?
So the question is, for Kat, and do you see the Amazons and the Googles of the world as disruptors?
Yeah, as disruptors, because they don't have the handcuffs, but yet they still know as much about that individual as a provider would due to their searches, their online activity,
I
etc.
don't think they know as much. And I say this because I'm conscious of what we don't know, despite the fact we have the entirety of that health record.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that means that we're operating different spaces. So what my work is about is basically trying to replace clinical trials effectively in research. I mean, not entirely, but like that's the direction we're going, right?
Mhm.
Can we make a definitive statement about the quality of this treatment for a patient population that looks like this? And I think what a Google is targeting is something very different and much more sort of consumer facing. I can't speak to exactly what exactly they're trying to do, but I think about something like Google Flu, and it's just a very different target population. And so I don't know whether they're disruptors, like whether they're really going somewhere good or whether it's all hot air. I have a lot of money, so that's a thing. But I don't necessarily think of us as being in the same space. But I think that actually, like Google Flu is kind of cool from the perspective of like surveillance. So like I think that maybe has more traction in an area like public health.